welcome to the Monsters and Myths show, where we shine a light on the obstacles and inhibitors, the things that will trip you up when you're trying to change things on an innovation or transformation journey. Today's guest, Mr. Robert Wood, is a former Marine turned Drinks Iconoclast. He is a multi-award-winning founder, entrepreneur, and I met him about 6 years ago now, when I had the pleasure of experiencing some of the products that he had made at the time. And I've followed him very closely ever since then. And I was really excited when he got hold of me after listening to episode 1 of this series. And he said, "Hey, I see those monsters in my industry." And working in the hospitality industry, he was quite surprised to discover that actually the monsters and myths that we've been talking about over the previous couple of episodes manifest themselves everywhere. And that's part of the whole thing behind this series. Is I'm trying to get people to understand they're not industry specific. So without further ado, Mr. Robert Wood, do you want to tell our listeners and viewers a little bit about yourself and how you end up seeing so many monsters and myths in your industry?
Thank you for having me on the show. So my name's Robert Wood. I am a bartender, if you'll ask me. This is something that tends to be a hang-up because I'm not really a bartender anymore, but it is still what I refer to myself because when people ask, I want it to be fairly easy. I've been bartending, if you will, for a little over 15 years. Started working in bars and started opening bars, and then eventually started working them as outside projects, working with brands and other owners to refine their own product and bring in some of our own status quo breaking systems.
And I can say that that's quite a collection of beverages behind you. For those that are listening on the podcast, you really need to actually jump onto the YouTube channel to rather see that, the tools of your trade, as it were. And I know that you've been asked to do a number of very inventive things. I have to say that for me personally, and I should have said this right in the beginning, you actually epitomize innovation. I know you shy away from that term when I've used it before, but in the recent lockdown, while the entire hospitality industry was devastated, you ended up coming up with multiple innovative ways to carry on earning a living, whereas most of the others just crawled into a hole and curled up in a ball. So you are very creative, very innovative in the things that you do, and you've been asked to do some strange things before, but more importantly, you've encountered monsters and myths, which you're going to share with us today. So what's your first monster or myth that you want to talk about?
Well, I think going immediately onto the subject of innovation, I think my first monster, I guess, would be the notion that innovation for innovation's sake is something that controls our industry. We have I suppose, a collection of 20 or 30 recipes, maybe even less, that might be referred to as classic cocktails, drinks that date back to the 1800s. And there are a sense that they have been around for a long time because they're excellent. But going into a bar and ordering a dry martini, a Manhattan, an old-fashioned, you should be able to get them, and you should be getting a very similar product when you order those things. In the same way, if you walk into a restaurant and order a classic dish with a classic sauce, it's going to be that sauce, not a version of that sauce. And it would appear that going into a bar now and ordering a Negroni, an old-fashioned, a Bloody Mary, you're getting a version of it, so the bartender can show off how creative he is, to show how innovative he is. when it comes to the Bloody Mary specifically, because it's flavors that people are familiar with before they even touch booze. It's a subject matter that is quite maddening for me personally, because of course you might have made a tomato-based dish and you might have read cookbooks, or watched mom or grandma or dad cook. The world of tomatoes, etc., are immediately opened up to you. Now, I can't remember the last time I walked into a bar and ordered a Bloody Mary and actually got what would be considered a Bloody Mary, and yet I do get red wine, soy sauce, basil, all the things that don't go into a Bloody Mary. And in fact, one particular case a few years ago where a bartender served me a Bloody Mary that he was quite eager to tell me had blood in it.
Sorry, so what, real blood?
And that was pretty much my reaction. I said, blood? And he said, well, not human blood, but pig's blood. So I bought pig's blood from a Chinese supermarket, like the kind of thing you would make, blood soup or blood pudding, a black pudding. And I've distilled it using a rotovap, which is a piece of machinery that's come from a laboratory. It is a under pressure vacuum distillation unit. You can distill pretty much anything. And when I say anything, I mean anything. Now, this particular gentleman had distilled blood to take the iron content out of it, to put it into the Bloody Mary to add a iron-like taste to said Bloody Mary. My question to him was, when was the last time you tasted blood and it was a good thing? The last time I tasted blood was when I was punched in the face. And that wasn't a particularly memorable experience. Cutting yourself, heaven forbid your child gets hurt and you put their wound in your mouth, whatever. None of these things are pleasurable to most, I might add. And the question had not really come across this particular person. It was a case of, well, I can distill blood, and therefore I'm going to distill blood.
So just doing it because they can, not because it added or enhanced anything, not because anybody had ever asked for it. I mean, that is a perfect example of an innovation monster, of, we've got to do something cool because it's cool. Although I can't, and also
to that end, you also have maybe it's not a flip side, but it's an extension of that, I think, where people want to use innovative and modern processes and innovative methods like distillation, like centrifuges, like sonic homogenization, to say that they've used that method. And I think that's, again, one of those things where you want to use the latest and greatest, the newest and most, trendiest of techniques or buzzwords to kind of like tell your customer, your consumer, your guest that what you're doing is super cool. I presented a completely crystal clear, like water looking pina colada to a group of bartenders and asked them, how did I do it? Now, this kind of goes back to my childhood, where in my school, one of our teachers stood up on the lectern during an assembly, opened a can of dog food and spooned it into his mouth and asked, how did I do it? And walked off the stage. And the whole school was a rumor of how he must have, because he was a technology teacher, he must have cut it open and then re-welded the can. And no one got to the point that he just changed the label. And in fact, this crystal clear pina colada, the answer I got from this field of bartenders in front of me was that I distilled it, I'd centrifuged it, I'd done all these things, milk punched it and clarified it all these ways, where in fact I just added vodka to a sweetened coconut water and added some flavorings. And in fact, it was what they were like, wow, this is the most incredible thing. You must have done this, you must have done that, and all of them would have taken hours and hours and hours and thousands of pounds of equipment investment. And yet what I did was take a very, very simple approach and put it together in a glass.
There's a myth embedded in that one as well, and that is the myth that innovation has to be new and it has to be complicated, and that, as you say, you've got to use all the latest and greatest, and you can only be innovative if you're using the latest things. Whereas actually you've just what you've just described there is the fact that you can keep things really, really simple, use things that exist today, and still come up with something that's innovative. I'm not sure I would want a clear pina colada, because to me it wouldn't look like pineapple juice. But I suppose, after I've drunk it, that's what I. But
as long as there's no ice cream in it, that's okay.
Pina colada needs ice cream. Sorry, this is a side joke. We have this all the time. I think pina colada should have ice cream, although apparently I'm just uncouth and really, really can't. I don't know what a pina colada should actually consist of. I do have to vouch for Rob's pina coladas, though; they are bloody good. So yeah, there's a definite myth inside the over the complication. I have to admit that one of my guilty pleasures is watching MasterChef every year, and I have to laugh when particularly the amateurs get to the point where they suddenly start using all the gadgets, the sous vide machine and this and that, and they want to use it because, smoke machine, we're going to smoke it. And the end result is generally complete disappointment. The smoke machine doesn't add smokiness that they thought it was going to add. The sous vide machine means that their stuff comes out looking pale and gray because they haven't browned it off properly or something like that. And it's aligned with that innovation for innovation's sake, your monster. And that Bloody Mary is going to stick in my mind forever. I'm actually going to have to use that example. And as an extension to that, the myth that it's got to be complicated, and you can only innovate if you're using all the latest toys and techniques. And so that was a 2-for-1 in that one, unless that was one of your next ones that you were moving on to.
No, yeah, 2-for-1s are not something I normally do, but in this angle, you're welcome.
So what's the next up?
So I guess my next one would be outsourcing is okay. Because when I opened my first bar, someone told me immediately, you can't do everything. If you're going to work behind the bar and own a bar, you're going to find yourself missing things. And that was entirely true in terms that, I felt that because it was only a very small bar, only 10 seats, that I could keep up with the social media and the accountancy, or at least the bookkeeping, and work on the mise en place and the guest experience and the booking system and all of those things. And in fact, what we ended up doing was outsourcing almost everything except just focusing on the guest experience. And I think that's also something that translates into ingredients as well. A big one for me is outsourcing things from within my profession, within drinks industry. Of course, we have lots of products. You can look behind me and see a number of them. But one of the things that is always a sticking point for me is that people believe that if they do something themselves, that it will automatically be better. And my point is that if there is a company that does it and has done it for many years, done R&D and full reporting, not only in food safety, but in, every other development of food and drink, that when you buy it from them, you're buying a product that is not only 100% consistent, hopefully, but also you have a fixed cost and you know exactly what you're getting. And something I've seen quite openly through visiting the bars, judging cocktail competitions, and even having members of my own team coming into the fray and approaching new things. Okay, I made this cordial, this syrup. I made bitters is one of the big ones. Bitters is the salt and pepper of the drinks making world. It's the spice rack, if you will. But almost every bartender I know at some point in their career has played around with throwing herbs, spices, roots, fruits, etc. into a jam jar for a unmarked period of time with some high proof ABV, giving it a couple of weeks, and then filtering it out, sticking it in a bitters bottle, and tell people they made their own bitters. When I then ask them, how did you make it? What's your recipe? What mass was this bark? Under what temperature did you introduce it? You know, was it individual ingredients that you brought together at the end, and so on? And yet there is now hundreds of producers of bitters and cocktail flavorings. We can buy a bottle in the same volume you just made over 3 weeks for £10, and you get, you know, hundreds of serves in some case. And so for me, it's the idea of, if you outsource something, whether like myself, I'm outsourced by lots of companies to come in and do their creative work or their innovation for them, installing sustainability and responsibility programs, drinks through creative sessions or just full packages. They're outsourcing me because they don't either have the expertise in-house, or they want to outsource it because it's easier, it's more, you know, contained. And that's the same thing. If I buy raspberry syrup off the shelf, I know what's in it because they have to tell me by law. I know how it tastes. I know that the next time I buy it, it's going to taste exactly the same. And it's this idea of outsourcing something to a professional rather than a DIY version is almost always better.
And so if I take that as the myth is that you need to do it all yourself, which
Exactly.
is that. So you've dispelled the myth that,
or doing it yourself is better, I guess.
Yes, yeah. The myth that doing it yourself is better, because there are many occasions across industries where there are lots of specialists that have done the research, put in thousands, hundreds of thousands of hours to come up with a component part of something that you might be making. And whether that's an ingredient in your industry, or whether it's technology in a lot of industries, a component of an app, or whether it's a part of a eventual customer experience or product. And so many companies that I come across are under that myth that, we need to do it all of ourselves because then it's our invention, our innovation. And yet one of the most powerful business models that there is today is leveraging ecosystems. So having a network of reliable and trusted suppliers that specialize in the thing that they do so well, so that you can focus on what it is that you're delivering to the customer. Because that's the key thing for all of us. It's, what are we delivering to the customer? What is the customer paying us for? And the customer isn't paying us to go and harvest all the fruits or to grow all the stuff ourselves all the way back there. You don't need vertical integration both ways. Building up an ecosystem of trusted suppliers and partners, advisors, consultants, that kind of a thing, does not diminish. As a matter of fact, it will normally add to your end product delivery service, because you can pick and choose the best of the best, the things that suit you and what you're trying to deliver the most. So I absolutely, so the myth of doing it yourself, I think is what we're going to call that one. Just making notes for the show, for the things that, and that's a great myth. And with the way that you've described it, it's very much on a component basis within your industry, as you say, around the syrups and things like that. But that can be used as a metaphor in any industry. It comes to the same damn things. You know, where I was talking about the car industry that have been for many years using components from multiple different places and assembling them and putting it together. And you don't think, this car is worse because Mercedes-Benz didn't make every single component that's in there, every nut, every piece of electronics. As a matter of fact, you get comfort from the fact that it's been assembled with some of the best electronics from Bosch and some of the best of the, all over the place. So why would we think any different of any other product or service that gets delivered? So if you're innovating, don't try and do it all yourself. Don't fall under the spell of the myth that it's only innovation if you've done the whole damn thing from scratch yourself. Leverage your ecosystem and find the professionals within that.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. We've got good there. What's your next one? Have you got another one for us?
Yeah, so I think the next one is about money. Money is, of course, what makes the world go round. But so often I find companies, I guess, throwing money at a thing instead of actually looking at where it went wrong. And for me, this is something that I've had personal issues with, I guess, not personally throwing money at something, but experiencing it from both sides. When I've opened venues, or when we have opened venues, we always have done it on very small budgets. And in a fairly recent example, we actually had a bar, kind of word trickled down to us that this other bar in the city where we were operating was on the hunt for us. They were after our clients. They were after like what we were doing. Everything about what we did apparently offended them, and it was their mission to close us down. Now, they spent millions, I'll say, probably not millions, but at least 1 million on opening this incredible venue, and had all the best team, or at least the best individuals, from the managers to the staff. They had the best products, the funkiest seating and the most incredible looking venue. And after 8 or 9 months, they closed. And we were open before them, and we were open after them. And we didn't have a fraction of their budget. But what we always focused on was the customers walking through our door got the best possible experience for what we could do. Now, we don't have hundreds of pounds to spend on chairs, or thousands of pounds to spend on decor and artwork and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, we sustained through that period and were as popular as we were when they opened to when they closed. But they felt that if they threw enough money at this project, or even threw enough money at trying to close us, then that was one of those things that would happen, because they had more money and therefore they had more say, they had more everything. And this is something that we see quite often, again, in a similar notion to if you buy all the fanciest equipment, if you get influencers to use your product on social media, whatever it may be, throwing money at something isn't going to, I'm not saying it's not going to affect the final outcome, but in fact, what you can do is not throw a load of money at something and actually just look at what you can do with what you have and focus on the small parameters that don't require a huge amount of money, like, for example, being excellent at customer service and just making people feel special, not making the venue feel special, for example. And I think it's something that I heard Roland talk about in your first episode, where this idea of you don't need a lot to create a lot.
So the myth is definitely the myth that money can buy success.
Exactly, 100%.
And that is a huge myth. If I remember rightly, the venue that you're talking about that you were running at the time also actually won awards while the other company was trying to take you down. And
exactly.
And I had the pleasure of visiting that venue as well. And the
thing
that made it special was the people, the vibe, it was the culture of the place. And I think that a lot of people try and copy. They try and see something that they think is cool and innovative, and they think, oh, if we spend enough money, we can create exactly the same thing. And they don't give thought to the things that money can't buy. You can't buy a culture or a vibe or heart and soul, as I would say.
Yes.
And that is a huge myth. And I think that a lot of big companies fall foul of that, thinking, well, if we just set up an R&D department and we put 10 million against it, we are going to be so successful. We're going to crush it in the market. And there comes a cheeky little startup that's been bootstrapped out of nowhere, dumpster diving for kit, but the people behind it have got their full heart and soul in it, and the culture is what attracts the customers. You can't compete against that. You just
Yeah.
can't. That eats the finance and the budget every single time. So that's a brilliant myth, and it's one that I really wish I knew how to kill, how to dispel, other than just to repeatedly show people examples. I mean, I've worked in
Exactly.
organizations that have spent huge amounts of money trying to be cool, and it's fallen flat because the people who were tasked with executing, their heart wasn't in it because it was a diktat from above, as it were. So they
Well, I
didn't.
guess it's that idea of you can buy innovation as well. You can't buy it; it has to happen.
Yeah,
You can facilitate it, but you can't buy it.
yeah, you can facilitate it. I That's part of what I do a lot of, is
Mhm.
as an innovation catalyst. I can facilitate, but my role is to bring out the best in your people, in your organization, to think and be more innovative, not for me to say, here's the cool thing that you must do, because then it's not yours. And
Yes.
so that, yeah, money can't buy success. That's a good myth, and that's the I think we're about done. You got anything else left for us? We're on 25 minutes
No,
at
I
the moment. That's
yeah, I
perfect
think we're good.
timing then. That's we're going to wrap it up there then. But if people want to find out more about you, and they want to stalk you, find out what your next project is, what's the best way for them to do that? Is that Instagram, Twitter, website? I'll put it in the show notes, but just for the people that are listening instead of watching or reading, where do
Yeah,
they?
Instagram's probably the easiest thing, the thing that I check probably the most.
Yep.
So Instagram is Bon Vivant Bartender.
Yep.
If you're not an Instagram user, then I'm in Rob We Trust at on Twitter. And in fact, if you wanted to email me, I honestly I wouldn't mind. I'm on my email every hour God sends anyway, and that is of course also inrobwetrust@me.com.
Perfect. I will make notes of all of those and put them in the show notes. Rob, it has been fantastic having you on the show today, and for you to share your stories that show that monsters and myths go across every single damn industry. And I hope it's going to encourage other people to start hunting the monsters down themselves and identifying them, and figuring out how they can kill the monsters, dispel the myths. Thanks again
It was
for
my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
cheers.